Welcome to the Owning Your Menopause podcast. I am super excited to talk to my guest today, none other than the lovely Suzy Reading, who has become a really, really good friend in this crazy space of sort of social media. We've met in real life. We're actually going to be collaborating on some things. So it's a great honour to have you on the podcast today. So thank you for joining.
It is such a joy to be with you. Thank you, my darling. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I love it. So I'm going to start kind of a little bit before you came to doing what you're doing, because I like to get a little bit of background on my guests to find out what drove you, I guess, to working in this space. Tell us a little bit about sort of Suzy, I guess, before Instagram became a thing where we could reach and help and support more people. And then let's move on through that and onwards.
Okay, so there have been lots of glorious twists and turns of my career that I would say, like two decades of hindsight, now it all makes sense. But so I originally trained as a psychologist. I moved to the UK and started a business working as a personal trainer. I did that for 7 years. There were some parts of my degree that weren't recognised by the British Psychological Society here. And I didn't actually plan on staying that long. So it was like I just needed a job that would fund my, my travel and my exploration here. But what I didn't realise is that Australian PTs are held in really high regard here. So yeah, that short-term stopgap job turned into a 7-year business that I loved. And as part of that, I did yoga teacher training qualifications. And that for me was a beautiful bridge between the mind and the body. And then it wasn't until I moved back to Australia that I reclaimed practicing as a psychologist. And that was very much, it was life experience of motherhood colliding with the terminal illness of my father that really helped me feel like I've had my own dark night of the soul. I felt very ready to work therapeutically with people. And so my work these days is a beautiful pick and mix of all of those different modalities. Whether people come to me as an executive coach or for grief counseling or for support in the transition to motherhood or through the different seasons of their life, like through menopause, everyone is going to come away with some kind of breathing practice, movement practice, psychological strategies, relaxation practices. It's a beautiful melting pot where I get to take care of people, head, heart, and body.
I love that. And do you know what? What I find really interesting is actually a lot of the people that I talk to and I interview, it's that life experience that I think for a lot of us, when we get to this life stage, this sort of second spring, as they like to refer to it in Japan, that's what really drives us and feeds us, is that experience that we have and that empathy, I think, that we can then offer others. And I think that is you can see that with what you do. You can see that with how you help people, and you can see that with how you support people. I love that little bit you said about the PT, because actually that is a new fact for me about you, which is exciting. So bringing that forward a little bit then, I guess, into, you mentioned menopause. I think it is a time that for a lot of us, it does spring up. We aren't necessarily aware that we're in this crazy life stage. You've touched on, obviously, grief. I think that hits many of us at this time. We're often caring for elderly, sick parents. We've got kids. You've talked about mum struggles. It's a real pot, a boiling pot waiting to explode. And I think this cohort of women currently going through menopause aren't very good at self-care. They don't really understand what that means, perhaps what it looks like, and how it can really support them. So Suzy, how can it help them? How can self-care, and what is self-care, support women at this time?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Kate, because, I think while often we're not in agreement about its importance, I think there's a lot of resistance. So many people feel like it's still not okay for us to do it. But I think when we actually have a practical working definition of self-care, I think that can actually take some barriers away. So the definition that I'd love to offer up is that self-care is health care. It's how we tend to ourselves emotionally, energetically, mentally, physically, And for me, I don't think there's any separation between mind and body, but I just want to get people thinking broadly about what it is to nourish ourselves. And that's what it is. It's nourishment. It's energy management. And from that perspective, it could be a ritual. It could be a skill. It could be engaging in a certain practice. But, none of these things have to incur a great investment of time or money. And for those barriers, I have a list of 100 different options that I can offer up. But I hope that working definition will dial down some of the guilt that we feel about nourishing ourselves. Because at the end of the day, without our health, what do we have?
Yeah. Where do you think that guilt comes from? Where does it stem from? Because it's funny, because I don't remember my mum feeling guilty. Like, I know for a fact, and she won't mind me saying this, that we very much sort of fitted in with her life. Whereas I feel now, as parents, we do so much to make sure our kids are okay. That could just be me. That could just be my experience of being a parent, that I perhaps overparent because I wasn't necessarily the parented child. But I think that we're so... there's so much more out there for us to deal with as parents, that I think that perhaps shapes us a little more. So, or is it just as women we're doing so much more? Where does that guilt come from that we don't allow ourselves that space and that time? And I'm not necessarily that's for all women, but I definitely, the conversations I have with sort of my surrounding friends is the guilt they feel when they stop.
I think there are so many different threads to it. Now, regardless of gender, if you take a look at the messaging that we've all imbibed about rest, I'll sleep when I'm dead, rest is for the wicked, it's the biblical references to rest. Sloth is seen as one of the 7 deadly sins. So I think regardless of how we've been raised in terms of gender conditioning, there is a feeling like it's not okay to be seen as slowing down. That compassionate pace is somewhat synonymous with being lazy or indulgent. But then when you take a closer look at, I guess, even just how children are raised, kids are raised to, a good baby is one that doesn't cry. Yeah, a good child doesn't talk back to adults. There's this sense of our worth is contingent upon how convenient and how pliable we are, and that needing other people is somehow an inconvenience, right? Emotional expression is not encouraged. And then when you take a look at gender conditioning, we've got the good girl who places everyone's needs above her own, who doesn't rock the boat, who doesn't ruffle feathers, who just gets on with it, makes nice and looks after everyone else. So, and then in more recent times, I think it's amplified by some of the messaging that we've taken on board from positive psychology, which, do you know what? I am a huge fan of positive psychology. It's definitely informed my practice as a psychologist. But I think sometimes these concepts of post-traumatic growth, of gratitude, of resilience, sometimes they get co-opted in this whole, productivity is king. Resilience means that we don't need other people. And that's a really unhealthy take on what resilience and what it is to be human. So there are all of these different messages flying around. And then we've got it's the information era, isn't it? So, in times gone by, I can remember as a kid looking up in an encyclopedia, right? But now, if we have an issue, it's like, well, you consult Dr. Google and there's this expert saying this and that expert saying that. We sort of feel like we should be all things to all people. And oh my God, I'm exhausted just talking about all of those different threads. That's why we don't feel it's okay for us to take care of ourselves, or we're overwhelmed with what that potentially might look like, when really it can be remarkably simple.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think you're right. It comes at us from every angle. One of the words that I love that you use a lot and is compassionate, and being compassionate towards yourself. And even when I hear myself say that, I think if I use that again with some people, it would still seem very alien to them. But I guess kind of bringing it back, that compassion and that self-care, and like you said, it will mean different things to everybody. And I just want to mention it, obviously, so like for me, when I know when you do your posts and you ask people to engage, what is your self-care, and people might say yoga, people might say, and actually when my dad was ill, my one sort of thing that really helped me was lifting weights, and it was the connection for me of my mind and my body, and I switched off, and also cold water swimming and finding my breath. Those are the two things that for me are self-care, and I think it's important to say that, because I think for so many people who might have a busy mind and a busy life and find it hard to be compassionate with themselves, they feel like when we say self-care, it has to be in a quiet room, we have to use breathwork techniques, or we have to be doing something that seems really alien to them. I think it's really important for people to find what their self-care looks like.
I love that, Kate. I love that. And I think there are different seasons in our lives requiring different practices. When I look at the kind of things that I would do to nourish myself before becoming a mum, they were completely different to what I needed when I was in the throes of taking care of a newborn with my dad in intensive care. My self-care, it started out when my baby was sleeping, I'd sit and watch Days of Our Lives or Young and the Restless. And I tell you what, if you're not depressed before you watch those things, you will be after it. And I very soon realized I needed to be making a more uplifting choice. And so I rolled out my yoga mat and I set myself up in a restorative yoga pose. And sometimes I'd drift off. I had to sleep on my yoga mat. I just didn't have the pep for the standing poses. I needed to receive. And if I fell asleep, it didn't matter, because I had my baby monitor next to me. As soon as my baby was awake, I was going to be awake, and that was my tonic for months, absolutely months. But that was that one season of my life. My self-care in this season of my life looks like going for walks by the canal, seeing if I can find a kingfisher. It's different things in different moments. And I really urge people to connect with what is it that feeds you? What is it that helps you feel alive? Do more of that.
I love that. You've just given me goosebumps, kind of like that different season thing, because I think, again, that is so true. We try sometimes to hold on to something that served us, and then it doesn't, and then we question why, and moving through the seasons is true. So I'm going to bring it a little bit forward, obviously, to talking more about midlife women, because I think one of the things, and you're really, really good in this area, is sleep. So many women struggle with sleep, especially in midlife. And again, I'm pretty sure it has to do with this stepping back and winding down, and what does their routine look like before bed. But what would your self-care strategies be that you can recommend, I guess, to support better rest, to support that kind of calm system?
Do you know what? I'd say that the quality of our sleep is literally the culmination of all of the choices that we've made in our day. So if you're looking at trying to cultivate better quality of sleep, we need to be looking at the things that we do from the moment we get out of bed. And if you're really serious about giving yourself the chance of better sleep, it's really worth taking a look at what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And it's deeply individual. So if I share some of the things that I know scupper my sleep, this might not have any bearing on someone else. So, it's a matter of get really clear on what works for you. But for me, at this point in my life, as a highly sensitive perimenopausal woman, I can't drink any coffee anymore, any. And I've tested it out. This is now, I think I'm 7 months post breakup with my daily coffee. And I would have just one coffee in the morning, right? And I was thinking, well, that's fine. But what I didn't realize it was just setting me on this, it was like hyper drive. And then it led to this cascading of other choices. For me, it masked sensations of hunger. So not only was I, adrenalized, I was hangry without realizing it. I wasn't feeding myself. I didn't eat earlier enough in my day. Since cutting it out, I've tested it out a couple of times. And I tell you what, even though I don't feel that same sense of, it's not like drinking a cup of anxiety anymore, I do notice I can get to sleep okay, but I will wake up at 2 and I'll be like, that's when I'm writing the next book. I'm drafting the perfect email. I'm coming up with the perfect rebuttal to the conversation I had yesterday. So for me, I've had to go coffee free. I still have I still have green tea, so it's not completely caffeine free, but that's made such a big difference for me in midlife. I know a lot of other people have the same with alcohol. So it's looking at what interferes with good sleep, but then it's taking a look at what supports the chances of good sleep. Because let's also be honest, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that you cannot make yourself sleep. So I think it's a fantastic goal to want to improve the quality of your sleep, but let's look at what lies within our control. And that is we can build the capacity to rest. We can build the capacity to relax. Now that's the precursor to sleep. You can, make that happen. So it's looking for opportunities for little purposeful pauses in our day where we're learning to soothe. We need to become skilled at that during the day if we have, if we want to have a fighting chance of doing that when our head hits the pillow.
I love that, purposeful pauses. I'm just noting that down because I think that, again, that plays into what we were saying earlier about living life at such a pace. We don't ever take that pause, which, as you say, can impact. I'm also like, my mouth dropped, as you saw when you said no coffee, as I'm sat here, possibly having had like my third coffee. However, I do sleep. So
it's okay.
I know. So for me, that's okay. It's the wine that does interrupt sleep massively. And I think that's a huge thing, right, for women. I think navigating menopause, and I loved what you said as well about how the coffee impacted your food choices, because again, a lot of the women that I work with do what you say. They don't eat early enough in the day, so they're not supporting or nourishing their bodies. Their blood sugars dip. And actually, it's interesting because I've not had this conversation with somebody where coffee has perhaps impacted them to then not make those good choices throughout the day. So I think you're right. It is from the minute you wake up to the minute your head hits the pillow. It's how you talk to yourself. It's how you eat. It's what you drink. It's how you move. That has a massive impact
Totally.
on your sleep at the end of the day. And I guess on that note as well, bringing in your PT experience, which I love, how does movement and exercise feature in your approach to self-care? And I guess we're not talking
pivotal.
What are some gentle ways, I guess, that women can stay active rather than, because again, I think when we talk about exercise and movement, people think that we're sending them on like a 10K run, and we're not. But yes, so for you, how do those feature in your approach to self-care?
Amazing. Do you know what? If you want to lift heavy weights, fantastic. If you want to run, brilliant. If you want to go and do HIIT, awesome. This is about you find what works for you. If those things don't resonate, let's not equate movement necessarily with exercise, because I think a lot of people, honestly, people have been put off movement by sport in school. They've been told that they're not good at it. They equate it with it being aversive, unpleasant. So let's peel it right back. This is about what movement supports you through your day. So it could be gentle movements. After you send an email, take some chicken wing shoulder rolls just to let go of that mounting tension. It could be getting down on the floor and doing some stretches. I would even say that restorative yoga counts as movement, because there are times in life when, if you're recovering from injury, illness, surgery, the kind of movement that we would normally do becomes inaccessible to us, but we can still lie down in different shapes that open up the body to receive, the breath in different areas, or, encourage circulation. Maybe it's legs up the wall. I would even count self-massage rituals as movement, because you're encouraging, the movement of lymph circulation through your body. So it's really thinking really broadly, and it's also everyday things like walking your kids to school, having a little dance in the kitchen. All of these things count. It's whatever speaks to you. And I think for me, movement is the scaffolding that helps me deliver what's required of me in my day. So in the morning, my ideal day setup, now this is not possible every day, but my ideal would be going for a walk, getting a decent dose of daylight, So I'm boosting the functioning of my circadian rhythms. That helps me feel more alert when it's time to be awake. But equally, that will help me feel drowsier when it's time to sleep later. But that's just a gentle pace. You know, I quite like that. Up until a couple of months ago, I was doing a jog a couple of times a week, and that was a real treasured pursuit. And I'm going to be honest with you, there is a grieving going on at the moment because I can't do it at the moment. But the benefit that I'm seeing when I go for my walks, I'm noticing more natural beauty, and I'm stopping to pause and take it in, and I'm taking photos, and it's like, okay, so I can't do that at the moment, but I can do this, and it has other beautiful benefits. So it's, yeah, we've got to be responsive to our ever-changing needs, don't we? And I hope that in this conversation we're sparking people's curiosity about, you know, what movement can look like and how it can nourish us.
Yeah, I love that actually. I used to run a lot, and actually in lockdown, I did exactly what you're doing. I did the walking. I actually put my head up instead of just running. I had a
Yeah.
watch, and I was like, "How long am I running for?" You know, again, it's that thing that I think that we do because it's been ingrained is a measurement of what we're achieving by a digital format. You know, and again, I guess if we talk
Yeah.
about women, that might be what scales on their weight. That might be that watch. Have I done this distance? As soon as you strip that back and take that away, like you're saying, actually head up, you know. And I remember then on the walks, I'd hear a woodpecker, you know, and I would record and I would hear the sound, and then I'd come back and I'd say to my kids, "Oh my God, we've got to go down there." You know, I heard a woodpecker, like little things, whereas before you're solely focused on kind of like boom, boom, boom. I do think that weirdly situations happen, and it gives you that opportunity to sort of step back and reevaluate, which is obviously like what's happening for you. Moving on to
Mm.
menopause, because I know that you are in the thick of it. What have you changed? I guess what were your let's go. What were your symptoms? Did you have any major symptoms? Were you aware of menopause, and what has Susie changed to help her manage
Oh,
her own symptoms?
I'm very glad you've asked. It's really funny. I can remember in my early 40s, a really good friend of mine asked me if I'd speak on a panel about menopause. And at the time, I thought, I don't know anything about that. You know, how can I help? And she said, Suze, your toolkit for stress, loss, and change is so helpful. Please come and speak about stress, loss, and change. And I'm like, I can do that standing on my head. Of course, I had enough time to go away and read a bunch of books about perimenopause. And I'm like, oh my God, how did I not know that this is okay? So this is only 7 years ago, right? Now, even having prepared for that talk and doing that reading, we're in the middle of lockdown, and I'm like, I've got pain in my foot. What's this about? Unfortunately, it took 2 years to actually be seen, and I've ended. It's arthritis. Other than that, I had a sticky, frozen shoulder kind of thing going on. And then after lockdown, I went to the dentist and he said, "You're in early stage gum disease." And I'm like, what the? Oh my God, this is perimenopause. Yeah. And it took this cluster of events and going to the GP and be sent to different specialists, foot specialist, shoulder, dent. I needed someone to take care of my hormonal health. So for me, that it meant I changed the method of birth control that I was on straight away because I was aware that that was potentially having an impact on my bones. Um, I started HRT. I took a look at what I was eating, how I was moving. And to be honest with you, the movement thing, that came kicking and screaming. If I could have just kept doing the movement that I was doing, I wanted to, but my feet don't function as they did before, so I can't do all the toes tucking under poses in yoga. And there's a grieving involved with that as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I guess it's, for me, it's been looking at how I can really be tender with myself because this is big, this is real, and it changes how we live our lives, doesn't it, Kate?
Yeah. Do you know, it's funny because I think, I'm not funny like ha ha, obviously. Like you're saying, however, no one seems to be prepared, and you know, you are obviously a very well educated person as well. You do reading, you've written books, And again, I would think I was in that position. And yet, for nobody, and a lot of the women that I talk to and work with, and I know you're in the same boat, menopause doesn't seem to be on their radar. And I really think, there is a massive early intervention piece that needs to be done kind of across the board. I think it's great. We're making really strong change when it comes to women getting diagnosis and having access to HRT. But as you've just correctly pointed out, the exercise piece, and you've got this background of and a history of you're a PT. I was a PT. They didn't talk about menopause when I qualified to be a PT. There was just nothing.
No.
We did pre and postnatal if we wanted to, and so I think it is really interesting to know that your story is very similar to other people's stories, and I think it's exactly that. Like that, it is a change, and it is a change for life. But like me, you're a massively positive person. And if we can equip ourselves with a really good toolkit, it's a really, really
Absolutely.
good opportunity for change and reinvention and, getting rid of all the toxicity that we've perhaps carried with us for so long and kind of starting afresh.
I'm so pleased that you're speaking to the gifts of this season because it's so important. But I just want to preface that conversation with, just don't wait for hot flushes. Yeah, because I think a lot of the signs that we associate with perimenopause are the later ones. And actually, if we talked about all of the myriad of the other signs and symptoms, I think we'd be better prepared. That's what I wish I'd known. But yes, this is not just. It's not just a list of aches and pains. This chapter of my life, I tell you what, it's been a burning away of all the dross, right? It's the clarity that's come with this period of my life it's invigorating, it's exciting, it's galvanizing. I feel such a sense of purpose, and I feel like I am so ready to get out of my own way. And that is the gift of perimenopause. And I would love to be having this conversation more often as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's brilliant, and that's what we need, are these positive conversations. Now, I'm going to bring us a little bit further forward because we're coming into a season. We're coming into winter, and you have a book, Self-Care for Winter, which explores self-care in the colder months. And it is quite funny because I've already had a few calls from various little magazines. How can we look after ourselves as we come into winter? How do we stay motivated? How do we do all these things? Because the winter months can come with a sense of, I guess, overwhelming, I would say anxiety for some, because it's Christmas. That brings, again, change for a lot of people. So let's go with the book Self-Care for Winter, which looks at self-care in the colder months. What inspired you to write about this specific season, and how is winter a unique time for self-care?
Okay. Well, I wanted to speak to it because winter is hard because it's hard. Yeah. And I have so many people saying to me, I feel lazy. It must be because I'm weak. I really struggle. No, we struggle in winter because it's hard. It's really tough on us. We have to be really diligent in how we take care of ourselves in winter. And I think if we can sort of take a look at, there's a beautiful invitation in winter. Yeah, there's a call to slow down, to retreat, to turn inwards, to hibernate. And I wanted to write the book because I want to show people how to honor these impulses, but in a way that is life-giving. So there are three sort of main elements of this approach. It's, yes, hibernate, absolutely. Seek all of that turning inwards, but don't stagnate. It's so important that we keep moving, even in hibernation mode. And we've talked about what some of those options are. It doesn't have to look like exercise or fitness. It can be have a stretch, go for a walk. All of that counts. And then the second one is, yes, seek all the cozy comfort, but let's choose comfort that makes tomorrow easier. Yeah? so often the comfort that we turn to habitually are things that have their own energetic tax, or they make it harder to sleep. And if you're only relying on those things, it's going to make tomorrow harder and harder. So it's about having a broad toolkit from which to draw. It doesn't always have to be comforting foods. And the comforting foods that you eat doesn't have to be foods that sabotage you. You know, have colours on your plate. That's comforting. Yeah, it doesn't have to be stodge. It doesn't have to be chocolate. It doesn't always have to be red wine. It may be those things. I'm not saying don't eat those things. I'm saying make sure that there's variety, breadth. Yes. And the last principle is we want to retreat, but make sure we don't isolate ourselves. Yeah, it's so important that we stay plugged in and connected, keep communicating care. The way that we socialize might change because I think our social mojo, our appetite for going out. I mean, I have to be honest with you, I'd be happy to make evening plans in about April. I just don't fancy going out of an evening. But, you know, you don't have to go out of an evening to come together. You can go for a walk together. Yeah, you can get together for brunch, or you can have an old-fashioned phone call. And it's also an opportunity to connect with self. So let's just make sure that we're not isolating ourselves, because that loneliness is really harmful for our health.
I love that. So whilst you were saying all this, I was thinking of a way of combining those three things that you've just said. And so I've come up with this. So what people can do based on what you just said is call a friend, okay, to go for a walk, put on your woolly jumper, okay, so you're wrapping yourself up, you've got your connection by walking with friends, and then just make sure you've maybe made a nice wholesome bowl of like butternut squash soup. So you go for that walk in your woolly jumper and you come back and have a nice bowl of soup together and kind of put the worlds to rights by staying connected.
Magic. I feel nourished just hearing about it. That's how we winter.
Yeah,
and
it sounds appealing.
Yeah, if people can't get out, that's fine. That's fine. You know, snuggle, get in, but just, you know, keep moving, do some stretches. Yeah, because I do know, you know, it's real. You know, that thought of I just can't face it. If you can't face it, do keep moving though. Find other ways.
What would be your top tip then? Because I guess that's one of the things that I get with a lot of people is that it's the darker mornings and it's the getting out of bed. So so how do we encourage people to do that? Because I think it's when you wake up in the morning, it's like you said a while back, you know, we set the intentions for the day. What we do in the day plays out tonight. What we tell ourselves from the minute we wake up dictates, I think, how mostly that day is going to unfold. So obviously, you know, early in the morning I'm up because I'm doing exercise classes. There are times right now where I want to hibernate under that duvet, but I have a little mantra which is, you know, get up, get your body moving. It's going to be a great day and you're going to feel amazing. Plus I actually don't have a choice because Rupert obviously has dragged me out of bed at about 5:30. But what would you say to anybody who struggles with the mornings? Because again, there's a different school of thought. You know, if you're a night person or if you're a day person, you know, you kind of honour your body and stick with that. But whilst I get that and I appreciate we need to honour our bodies, I do think that getting up and seizing the day in the morning can just be so powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for. I'd love to honour my rhythms, but modern life doesn't allow me to. I've got to be somewhere at a certain time, or school starts at a certain time. So we've got to work with what we've got. I'd say the first thing that I do before I pick up my phone or get out of bed, I'll see if I can hear a bird, because that for me always just connects me with something bigger than myself. It takes me away from my to-do list. There's just a moment of presence. I can just be. If I'm struggling, I'll say to myself something like, it's not me, it's winter. I can be gentle with myself. I think these mantras are really important. I can be gentle with myself. And then if you think about what is it that we're deprived of in winter? We're deprived of warmth and we're deprived of light. So how is it that we can compensate for those things? We can dress ourselves in things that just give us that little bit of cozy comfort, and all the colour will help us. Have a layering of light and use other things that bring that comfort. It's not just, you don't just get comfort from colour and light. You get it from scent as well. So I think scent can be really important in winter, and all of these things just sort of coax us into It's all right. I can give myself time to get going, but I do need to get going. I'm going to get up and I'm going to be gentle with myself in the process.
I love that. I love the colour. I think you're right. I think, yeah, I can see you're here in this lovely, colourful. I just got a little bit of pink. But I think that colour, that vibrancy, again, kind of does add. And layering up, keeping warm, I think is brilliant. How does self-care for winter encourage readers to embrace the slower pace and reflective nature of the seasons rather than fighting it? Because again, I think we are giving them top tips, but how do we stop them from fighting it?
Okay, I think it comes down to acknowledging what happens when we fight it. Does it change what we're dealing with? Does it change how we feel about it? Does it achieve anything that we're setting out to achieve by fighting it? In my experience, it's just going to deplete us. The fact is, winter signals to us that we do need to slow down. And actually, when you take a look at the research, this is what I found really interesting research in this book, is that we actually do need more rest and sleep in winter. So it's okay if you need to go to bed a little bit earlier. I think it's just difficult if life doesn't allow that. And if life doesn't allow that, then how can we compensate for that in other ways? Whether that's restorative practices during the day. And, if you've got time for a nap, that's fantastic. Again, that's not going to be accessible to a lot of people. But there are so many different ways that we can reboot our nervous system. And it might be as simple as massage your horns, make a fist. Imagine where you've got two little goatee horns, press the base of your thumbs into your forehead and just, it just offers a little pocket of peace. It softens your eyes, it releases the tongue, it relaxes the jaw, it slows your rate of breathing down. When you release it, you notice that it lubricates the eyes. This is how we cultivate a compassionate pace. Yeah, it might not always be possible to slow down as you'd like to, but I think it's inviting tenderness into our lives. Yeah, and that can make all the difference.
Yeah, again, it does. It brings us kind of almost in that like full circle, because I think people, again, are so resistant sometimes, I guess, to that change and to taking time back. What role do nature and seasonal rhythms play in your approach to winter self-care? And how can the readers, when they buy your brilliant book, align their well-being with the energy of the season?
Okay. There are so many beautiful metaphors for us in nature. Yeah, and I think if you look at how the plant and animal world respond to those natural cues, the environmental cues, why do humans expect themselves to be immune? We are nature too. Yeah, so it's okay for us to take a different guise. You look at the Arctic fox, she changes her coat. You look at what the trees do in losing their leaves. I love that nature reminds us that, we're perfect and we're whole, regardless of whether we're in full bloom or whether we are bare naked branches. Like, that's enough. Like, you are enough regardless. And I guess the moon shows us that too. And I love that. Okay, so maybe we're deprived of sunlight in winter, but this is where the moon gets to take center stage. And one of my favorite rituals, given that it's dark, oh my God, it got dark at like 4:30 yesterday. Like, how it was getting dark at 6:00 2 weeks ago. This is bonkers. It changes so quickly. But let me share with you my favorite ritual with my kids. We go out when the sun's gone down. The last couple of weeks, we've been looking for bats at twilight. Now, the bats are hibernating already, but we go out looking for foxes. We go fox spotting and we go stargazing and we look at the moon, and it's, it has its own joy. It's got its own charm. There are unique joys to winter that are just waiting to be mined. And that's what I wanted to talk about in the book. All of these things that, again, I didn't know them before researching this book. Going watching the starlings, the murmurations, like that is one of my peak life moments right there. It only happens in winter. And if we can switch from winter dread that literally just fine tunes our eyes to seek out all of those things that are genuinely challenging, it's not about glossing over that, but let's also make space for this unique joy available to us? Can we be on the lookout for that? And that's why my ore hunting is probably one of my top tips for winter. But honestly, there are so many metaphors, and there's one more metaphor that I want to share, in that you look at how trees navigate winter. Yeah. So trees lose their leaves. And in that, what they're modeling for us is that as a human being, you don't have to pitch up and show up and give of yourself the same way all year round. When your resources are low, yeah, you can actually change how it is that you show up for other people. So we can tweak our boundaries. So in winter, the trees still provide bark that provides shelter and food for animals, but they're not going to give fruit and nuts. You know, they're like, I haven't got the energy for that. So I love that in winter, we can also say, do you know what? I haven't got capacity for that right now. We can say yes and no with a little bit more nuance. And this is what nature models for us.
And I think also you're putting a really like positive spin on it as well. It's that kind of, it's like that, don't fear it. Don't look at the dread. Go for it. Embrace it. Totally kind of go with it. I love that. So everybody needs to go out and buy your self-care for winter book immediately so that they can get through this winter feeling a lot more positive and nurtured and compassionate for themselves by the time we're through into the next season. So thank you. I'm going to ask one last question, which is what would you love, what positive thing, because I obviously want to be positive, would you love every woman to know before they hit perimenopause, menopause? What would be your sort of number one self-care tip?
That they are deserving of all the understanding, all the support, all the care, all the tenderness.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I love talking to you. I could sit here and talk for hours. And I hope that I get the opportunity to talk to you again very, very soon. So Susie, thank you so much. Where can, if people don't follow you, where can they find you and where can they buy the book?
Okay, so Self-Care for Winter, broadly available. There's links in my bio on Instagram.
Hold it up.
And if your local bookshop, if your local bookshop doesn't stock it, go and ask them. They'll order it in so we can support our local businesses. And I hang out on Instagram. That's where I love spending my time. That's where I'm going to be sharing all of my winter ore hunting finds. And I hope that piques some curiosity for joys to come. Come and hang out with me there.
Brilliant. I'll be there. So thank you, Susie, for your time. And I will see you very soon.
Such a pleasure.